preparing. The meeting's being live streamed. I got it. Zoom. Okay, I've got this. And then I want to get my little, I want to bring this over here. I want to mute that. I want to close that so I can see all the thousands of comments that I get from my adoring viewers. All 3 of them. Adam, you and your self-deprecation. What a card. Okay, cool. I'm going to start by clearing my throat loudly into the microphone. I think that's an important part of every live show. They say capture people's attention. And what better way is there to capture people's attention than making a loud, horrible retching noise directly into their ears? Regret is a powerful thing. When people regret something, like they regret tuning into this live show, it hooks them, maybe. This isn't the advice my social media team are giving me. They're giving me better advice, but I'm going rogue. I don't even care. Y'all, it's the break. We're in June. I'm off. It's amazing. And I know before I get a lot of angry letters from an angry letter writing campaign, I know I shouldn't be working during my time off. But here's the thing. That's not what sources me during my time off. What sources me is not having a lot on my calendar, but having a little bit. I like to have, usually just by the virtue of the universe, the way it works is like right around this time, a whole bunch of people come out of the woodwork and are like, can we talk about the Forge? Can we talk about working together? Can we, hey, America, nice to see you. Can we talk about this, this, or this? And oftentimes I'll push that out to July, but sometimes I like to have like just one conversation in there, which is kind of nice because most of what I like to do during my time off when I'm here in Victoria during the summer is sit at a coffee shop down by our harbor, watch life happen, watch the tourists, enjoy my beautiful city. And it's kind of nice to share that with someone on the phone, you know, just having a conversation, chatting. I also end up scheduling like catch up with friends, jump on the phone with people that I haven't had a chance to talk to during my schedule, the rest of the life. So anyhow, that's why we're doing this live show. Let's have a sip of coffee. Decaf coffee. The last time I sat in ceremony, which was last week, we were down there. I was talking to some of my friends who are shaman and work a lot with this medicine and work a lot in like nutritional, you know, part of following the medicine path is that you are really looking to heal your body in all places. And one of the places that Bay and I have been kind of slowly working is in our nutrition, because in our Western diet, we have a lot of stuff that has evolved that we've created that doesn't necessarily serve us nutritionally. And so the one right now that I'm slowly phasing out is milk. And I know there's lots of people that are like, if you're not a cow, you shouldn't be drinking milk, blah, blah, blah. And Bay was sharing with me something I found quite interesting, which was about some medical anthropology, which is what she studied in her undergrad, which is that many humans can't process lactose. We have lactose intolerance. So it's really hard for people to eat milk. However, when humans started to migrate and moved out of Africa up into the northern hemisphere and like, you know, the cloudier parts, the place with worse climates where there's less sun, what happened was there's less vitamin D that people could get into their system. They didn't have the sunlight. And so as a result, those humans started to develop a tolerance for lactose and ability to process lactose because milk is a great source of vitamin D. So it's very interesting that some people have developed this. And then the sort of knock-on effect of that I found quite interesting is when Africans were forcibly taken from Africa, enslaved, or just moved or whatever, caveat, we all agree that's bad, hopefully. But when they were moved to these northern regions, they were really screwed because they didn't have the adaptive trait to be able to drink milk to get the vitamin D, nor were they able to get enough from the sun anymore. So it causes these problems, anemia, stuff like that. Anyhow, I think that's interesting, but the reason I'm sharing this is because I'm starting to drink my coffee black. We're slowly phasing milk out. And that's a tough one because I love milk and I grew up drinking milk, and that was like a huge source of protein. Skim milk, you know, I'd play soccer for hours on end and then I'd come home and I'd drink a huge amount of skim milk, which I think was very good for my bone density, very good for my protein. But now I'm starting to like, we're looking to like, how do we meet that nutritional need in a different way? And these are tough things to take on. I find dietary changes really challenging. We took out red meat and pork about a year ago. And because I don't like eggs, I will tell you that nothing is less enjoyable than going out for breakfast when you don't eat meat, most meat, and you don't eat eggs. And also, I don't like avocados. So it's like I get a plate of lettuce when I get for breakfast, or toast. Homemade cashew milk is an excellent alternative, says Raf. Hey, Raf. And America says I use cashews and almonds. Yeah, one thing that we've been trying is macadamia milk. Macadamia nuts are quite creamy, so the milk is good. But I notice it never quite cuts the acidity of the coffee the way I want it to. Oh, well. Okay. We've got an awesome guest today that I'm going to bring on in a bit. Before we do, I'll start us off today by speaking to something someone wrote in about, which was my friend Drew, my friend, fellow coach, yeah, I know, America, no avocado. And the fun thing about being someone that doesn't like eggs or avocado is when people ask him, like, yeah, I don't like eggs. And they're like, you don't like eggs? Oh my God. And then I say, wait for it. I also don't like avocado. And then they are biologically required, evolutionarily, they can't stop themselves. They have to then say, oh my God, you don't like avocado. It's a very common conversation that I'm in. So my friend Drew, fellow coach, fellow pickleball enthusiast, he wrote and said, hey, can you talk a little bit about what you've learned about leadership from pickleball? And yes, is the first part there. What I'm more inclined to do is talk about what I've learned, what's shown up in my pickleball. And the other thing that I'm really into right now is Street Fighter 6 just got released. It got released last Friday, a week ago. And Street Fighter is a particular genre of a video game called a fighting game. I'm gonna take the sweater off now. And fighting games are you against one other person. It's a one-on-one battle, and you are fighting each other. Your characters have a bunch of moves that are available. And what's cool about fighting games is you have this roster of characters you can choose, and each character brings its own unique abilities. Some are good at fighting from a distance, others close together. So it's kind of like the promise of mixed martial arts, UFC, before it all became like its own unique fighting style called MMA. It's like back in the day when martial arts first started out, and you'd have like a sumo wrestler fighting like a monkey fighter or whatever. So Street Fighter 6 is just released. I'm loving it. I'm super stoked. This is like right in the sweet spot of young Adam getting into video games. This was the game that really like hooked me. And so it's got a very special place in my heart. And like everything I do, because who I am in the world is passion, I pick up stuff with gusto. I don't play a game I like a little bit. I read about it, I watch videos, I practice, I sit down and study it. And I do the same with everything that I love. So I do that with pickleball. I own a machine that feeds pickleballs at you, so you can practice a shot over and over and over again. And so I want to talk a bit about what I've gained from all of the transformational work that's shown up in those two arenas. And the way it used to go for me was I was very passionate, always very willing to like grind, but a lot of my experience would become that of a grind. So I would go to play and I would not be doing as good as I wanted to. I would not be playing up to my level of expectation, whether we're talking squash, pickleball, Street Fighter, virtual, any, whatever. And so I get frustrated with myself. And then from my frustration, I would like not have fun while I was playing, and then I'd stop, and then I would go to try to correct that. So I would willingly go and practice, grind it out, do some drills, sit and practice. And so the gift in that is that I'm willing to do the hard work. I'm very reliable for that. Some people won't. They're like, I just want to have fun. And that's totally okay. But there is a degree to which in life, if we want to become a master of something, we have to be willing to like put the nose to the grindstone a little bit. The consequence, though, is that I'd go and practice, and I wasn't practicing from a sheer love of doing it. I was practicing to overcome what I perceived as a flaw in myself. And so I'd then go and practice, and I'd be like tense and constricted and angry and fuck, this shot's not working. I can't do this combo, this character I'm using in Street Fighter. And then I'd take that practice and I'd go back and I'd start to fight and it might be good. And often what would happen was, as I was in tense situations, tournaments, that sort of stuff, it was just too much. It bore down on me and was unpleasant, and I wasn't having fun, and I was constricted, and I was annoyed. And so what eventually happened around when I was playing squash a lot, I was a pretty high level tournament player in squash, but I would always choke in the moments. And so I trained like a really, really good player. I played like a good player. I thought like a good player. I had great strategy. When I was in the zone, I was very, very brilliant. I made great shots. But once we got into the tournament setting, I would choke. I couldn't bring that forward. It was like there was a barrier. And everything that was happening was I had so much weighing on winning, on like being the best. And there was no connection to, am I having fun? Am I enjoying myself? And is it possible for me to enjoy myself while I'm losing? That wasn't available. And so there's one more thing I want to share, which is I also could not be I really struggled to be with the disappointment that I am. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying who I am as a human being is fundamentally disappointing. What I'm saying is that to be a human is to be disappointing at times, because to be a human is to be with the abundance of everything in life. So if you're never a disappointment, something's off. Just like if you never cry, something's off. If you tell me when we sit down to talk, oh, Adam, I never get afraid, something's off, because you're missing out on some aspect of what it is to be a human. Somewhere along the way, you've determined that thing that you never feel is bad, and then you've set it down. You've constructed your life to avoid it. You're kind of holding a beach ball into the water. And so this was the other thing that would kill me, is I would be playing and I wouldn't be playing as good, and then I'd get into my head because I'm like, fuck, this is a disappointment to the people watching. I'm a disappointment to myself. I couldn't be with that part of my humanity. And then it would all start to collapse. So there's a lot of pressure, a lot of challenges, a lot of not having that much fun, but being willing to keep going even though I'm not having fun. And so as I started to get into this work, transformational work, ontological breakthroughs, and continue to till the soil, so to speak, what's happened over time is that I haven't had to do anything, but what's continually shown up is like that fear of being a disappointment. And I've wanted to create stuff in my life that lies behind that disappointment, results for which I can only achieve them if I'm willing to go through that wall that we'll call disappointment. I have to be willing to be a disappointment to myself, to other people, etc. I have to be willing to be with people feeling disappointed. And so some of the ways this has shown up is like a really simple one would be my rates. Charging, as I've raised my rates, that means some people that are really excited to work with me are going to experience disappointment. And that was challenging for me to be with. So in the early days, I just be like, oh, don't worry, we'll charge this really low rate, and then I'll just resent you for a year. I'm giving you all my work, but not charging you anything commensurate to where I want to be. Not a good recipe for success or thriving or the life you necessarily want. So I've done a lot of work in this area because it's kind of a perennial thing for me. I'm a man who has a tremendous impact in the world. And when you have a tremendous impact, part of that impact is going to leave people disappointed. It's like when you see there's a story called Casey at Bat. I think it's a poem. And Casey's this ripped baseball player, amazing, probably was doing steroids back before they were a thing. And the poem's all about how he gets up, and it glamorizes Casey. What a badass he is. He swings his bat. The crowd is in awe of his amazing strength and his technique and everything, none of which I just demonstrated there. And then the poem ends with silence because Casey struck out at bat. And that kind of spoke to my allergy, just this idea of going up and taking a swing and striking out and looking like a damn fucking idiot. And so this started very young. I remember in grade 8 gym class, we were doing baseball, and I would never swing because I didn't want to strike out. I would sort of, no, that was a ball. No, that was a ball. Missed that, didn't go over the plate. I would like kind of try to game the system. So I became very eagle-eyed because I kind of find even the slightest, it was a good lawyer technique, the slightest thing that was off, and I could call that a ball, and then I didn't have to swing until I got a big, fat, juicy ball I knew I could hit, and then I'd half-heartedly swing instead of just belting it, which isn't that much fun, because instead of just being in the sheer joy of trying to belt a ball, which is very satisfying if you've ever played baseball, I'm instead in my head trying to calculate how to ensure I don't look like an idiot. So this goes back way long ago. So I've worked on this a whole bunch, and here's what has happened. What I've noticed has happened in pickleball, in Street Fighter, is that, well, look, there's a couple things. First of all, I have way, way, way more fun playing these games, regardless of whether I'm winning or losing, regardless of anything that's happening, regardless of whether my opponent's being mouthy, regardless of whether I'm getting taunted. Hey, Seth, nice to see you. Regardless of whether I'm losing, winning, regardless of even, here's another one, if I'm crushing someone, because it used to be that I'd show up, and if I was getting crushed, that was hard for me to be with. If I was dominating my opponent, my game would fall apart too, because I couldn't be with their feelings of disappointment. So it'd be like, oh my God, I don't want them to feel bad. And then I would let up. And I would lose to players that were definitely not as skilled or as talented or as athletic as me, because I couldn't be with the feeling of them feeling disappointed. So this stuff is pervasive. It doesn't just hit one place, it's throughout. So I have way more fun these days. In fact, I would say that like the biggest thing is when I sit down to play video games, when I sit down or stand up to play pickleball, I'm there and I'm having fun, and that's the paramount thing. So first of all, that's a huge win, because what I've discovered is that when I am expressing myself joyfully, when I am having fun unabashedly, that's when I play at my best. That's when I'm loosest. That's when I'm the most fluid. And that's what we're all striving for in high level competitive stuff, whether it's video games, sports, debate, spelling bees, whatever. If you're having fun, you're in a state of flow. And when you're there, you are able to think less and simply just react to as one of my teachers puts it, to let the game use you rather than you using the technique of the game. The ball comes, you already know what to do. You're just in the moment. So that's been a huge thing, that this ontological work, that leadership development has really put into my game. The second thing is that I've gotten much better at noticing when this constriction, when my forehead becomes very like a neutron star in terms of its contraction, when it gets really dense right here. I've gotten better at like noticing that and just like, oh, let's take a breath. Let's slow down. Okay, it's okay. Yep, this person's blowing you up. Don't worry about that. What can you learn? And so this is kind of the process of us learning something new, is that we start out and we're what you call unconsciously incompetent. We're not even aware of how we're bad. And as time goes on, we start to be conscious of our incompetence, and we start to constrict because we become aware of what we want to be doing and also of the fact that we're not able to do it. So we get to this bottlenecking place where we're like, fuck, I'm not doing the right thing. And that's where we throw our controller, break our racket, get angry, all of that stuff. And this is typically where things go off the rails, and then we get stuck here because we're contracted around that moment. And what this work has given me is the ability to like notice when I'm in these moments and to breathe and to put my attention somewhere other than I should be able to do this, to put my attention somewhere other than where I am right now is wrong. Where I am right now is not where I should be. And instead to just be right there, and then to kind of find my way to a place like, oh, I'm learning. That's been a humongous gift that this has provided me, is starting to just be able to hold grace for myself in the process of learning. And instead of like getting blown up by someone doing shoryukens on me all the time, like, oh, I'm learning not to do that. Okay, cool. Can I be with that process? So that's been humongous. And the final thing is that I've gotten a lot better at letting other people have their process. So I was playing pickleball maybe a month ago. I'm annoyingly healing a knee injury right now, so I can't play, which sucks. I was playing pickleball with someone and it was like a round robin kind of. So we get partnered up, and I like to touch rackets when we do a good play. You know, pickleball's played in doubles, which is the best. And so you touch rackets with your partner. Yeah, we're cool. And I went to touch rackets and this lady just wouldn't do it. I'm like, yo, we got to celebrate. You did awesome there. And her attitude was like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to jinx it. If I start getting that way, then it'll fall apart. You can imagine probably what happened, which is like very shortly on, she's focused on not having things fall apart. Things fall apart. She's not celebrating the awesome stuff that's happening as it's happening. And so sure enough, we get into the dip and then it's all grimy. And what I've learned to do is just allow her to be there and not take that on board, to really create a degree of sovereignty so that I can have fun regardless, so that I can celebrate the awesomeness and I don't have to dim my light, my joy, my whatever, because she's not having a good time, because she's frustrated. And what that does is it creates kind of like polarity. Anytime you're feeling a particular energetic state and someone else is feeling a different one, there's polarity between these two. The energetic laws of the universe pull us towards that state. And gravity, ultimately, it's energetic gravity. And historically, what I would do pre any of this work is I would come down to here. I was very, you could say generous, a little bit of a martyr might be a better way to put it. But if this person was feeling crappy, I would like, okay, I'm going to not have fun. I'm going to quiet ourselves. And then we're both hanging out in this shitty place. It's not much fun. And I've discovered if I'm willing to stay open-hearted, not make them wrong for their process, but continue to have fun myself, it slowly brings them up and out of it. And so my partners tend to play better with me too. All of us, we end up having more fun. So great question, Drew. Thanks for asking it. That's mostly what I've learned about pickleball, fighting games, other stuff like that from leadership. The other direction I'm not so sure on, because those things are more peripheral compared to like my life is about ontological leadership. That is my entire path on this planet is in that direction. So, okay, I've been talking for a while and it's time we brought Jana on. I'm gonna just talk briefly about how I met her and then we'll bring her on to share her, like our, how we connected. Jana just finished a year in the Forge with us, a really powerful year with a lot of like cool stuff that she's taken on. We'll get her to share about some of that. Just see if there's anything else I want to share. By the way, no, I just want to bring her on. So Jana, get your camera on, get your mic on, get yourself on. What's up? Look at that wallpaper.
Beautiful, isn't it?
It is. Did that come with a place or did you guys put that up?
No, all credit goes to an interior designer. When we moved into this house, I said, I've always wanted to have my own office and my beautifully designed office. So I had somebody draw up a plan, and she talked me into this British wallpaper and boutique, like a boutique place. And I was like, ooh, it's kind of, but I'm not very visual when it comes to like imagining what it's going to look like. So I was like, it would be never anything I would choose, but I'm just going to trust you. So I think it turned out pretty good.
You're happy with it?
Yeah, I love it.
It's
It's
always like
just
an,
different.
it's cool. We have this place also is very British and you can't see it, but like our carpet is this very like British ruggy kind of
Is
carpet.
it?
It's very high quality carpet. Apparently someone came and was like, wow, you got really good carpet. And it's like hotel
Oh,
carpet. And we were like,
nice.
oh, that's cool, I guess. But when we came in, we were like, that's ridiculous. We're going to tear that out immediately. And we're still probably going to do the floors at some point. But like, I don't know if this is how your wallpaper was, but like it just keeps growing on us and it hides a multitude of sins. You know, you can drop anything on the floor, it doesn't show up. And
That's nice. That's good
that's
for
cool.
carpets, especially when you
Yes.
have dogs and, kids.
Children at some point. Yeah, totally. It's very important.
Very,
Yeah.
very good idea. But I would
Yeah.
imagine like in that kind of place, having seen a few photos, don't you guys have like stone underneath? That would be nice too. Like if
Underneath the
it's nice.
carpet,
Yeah, if it's
I
like
think it's a
nice.
concrete bed. I think you're
Oh,
right
yeah,
about that.
okay.
I don't
Oh,
really know. I'm not sure. I
hmm.
just know there's carpet and that I can drop stuff on
Yeah. No,
it.
I mean, in any case, my dad put it up for me. So I will be forever grateful for his precision
Nice.
because like 4 panels make a picture. It's not
Uh-huh.
something you just kind of like put on. But no, I love it, and it's becoming a bit of a statement thing, like where or a signature thing, if you will, like where people like comment on it all the time. But yeah, no, I
Totally.
really do like it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. So how I think we met through the Samurai Coaching Dojo. Is that how we first came connected?
Yes, yes, I was a student, and you and Bay were co-facilitating or teaching some aspects of it. Mhm.
Yeah. So how, even before that, how did you get into coaching? What did you do first? And then what
Oh
led you
boy.
to pursue this? Yeah. Oh boy.
Oh,
Starting with the hard
how much
questions.
how much
Driving
time do you
deep.
have? Well, it's ironic because I've done a lot of like thinking work recently about, my offer and how to, and how to articulate it and how that links to my story. And what was really apparent very quickly was that I've always kind of done the same coaching work, which is career transitions, because I
Mm.
had 3 major career transitions in my first half of professional life. And so whilst I have now been coaching for 14 years, this is why I said, how much time do you have? Before that, I was first trained as a marketeer and journalist, and then I
Mm.
worked in sales for a brief stint. Um, and then I decided to study advertising and marketing communications, and I moved to England, did that there.
From Germany?
From Germany, yes. So I lived in
Okay.
Germany until I was 21. So now 20 years not in Germany. So I've, half of my lifetime I have not been living in Germany. But yeah, I spent 11 years in England, but I didn't move there for the studies. I want to say that I moved there just, with my boyfriend at the time and to work and do something different. Um, but after this career in like marketing and stuff, I felt like, oh, I've been here and done that, and I wasn't really excited by working for like one of the big Procter and Gamble type companies and sell
Uh-huh.
dish soap or dog food. And
Yeah.
so I decided to challenge myself. That was my thinking, because I had always like really not liked math very much, but I wanted to be a well-rounded individual. So I thought I'm going to
Terrible
become a
idea.
chartered accountant, a bit like the lawyer background.
Yes.
So
So
chartered
so let
accountant
me
in
let
the
me
US is
let me
CPA.
slow us down. So okay,
Mhm.
so you're first of all journalism and marketing, those sound like two
Yes,
separate careers. So how did
yeah,
they,
they
what was the
were.
connection?
Because I was working in a PR agency, so it was ads, marketing, and I also trained with the journalism school because we were doing a lot of editorial ads.
I see.
And
What is
then,
an editorial ad? I have an intuitive sense, but can you
oh, it's
explain
like
briefly?
basically we would go and talk to the local companies about what's going on for them and write like newspaper articles
I
and
see.
and then publish those, but they were paid ads. Mhm.
Got it. So they would pay for you guys to come and sort of like interview them and
Yeah,
okay, gotcha.
yeah,
Okay, so you do that. You moved to England at 21.
yeah.
How
In
long had you
2003,
worked doing marketing journalism at
three
that point?
years, 3 years.
Okay, and is that common to like for did Germans or Europeans do that a lot, like leave their country of origin that young?
I don't know. I guess, my background before that, having grown up in East Germany and then, I was 8 when the wall came down.
Oh wow.
I just was lucky that I was at a school which used to be like the Russian language school. You could study Russian there. My first year, well, my year group was the first year that could do English as well as
Aha.
Russian. And so I chose English at the age of 8. But
Good
also
call.
right?
Uh,
The other part was that it was a school that, because we were studying languages, I ended up doing English, French, and Spanish. And so it was encouraged that we would go to England on a school trip and then to Spain to a school. My sister went to America for like an 3-week exchange. And
wow.
so we just kind of got, you know, we got our eyes onto the bigger world pretty early on. And
Yes.
my first trip abroad, so to speak, was, besides like the school trips to England and Spain, was to go to England on my own because I was also involved in a very international sport, which was dragon boat racing. So I became,
Cool. You're a dragon
I,
boater.
I used to be, yes, I'm not
Uh-huh.
anymore. But yeah, I got really, really far with it. And that was also the thing that took me to America the first time was the World Championships in 2001 in Philadelphia, where I raced with the Chinese women's national team and won
Mm.
because I wasn't racing with the Germans. That's a whole other story. But we got to travel quite a bit as young people, my sister and I both. And so I think I very quickly decided like I wasn't going to stick around in Germany. What was common, and I think you kind of went that way a little bit, was that the the German system was structured in a way, like in England and America, you kind of go from school, finishing school to go to higher education, like college, university.
Yeah.
And especially in Britain, that's a huge thing. I don't know. But
Right.
in Germany, because of how the system is set up, there's a lot more apprenticeships and
Uh-huh.
trainings on the job, and training where you have on the job training as well as school training as well. So that's essentially what I went into, was what was called a volontariat, a mixed journalistic education.
That's what
Um,
brought you into that
yeah,
career, so to speak.
exactly. I was
Got it.
basically pinched from the stage, or sorry, kind of like, what's the best way to describe it? I had actually my eyes set on a medical career
Hmm.
in the hospital, and I had sorted that out, an apprenticeship at the hospital as a children's nurse. But then, because of my involvement in dragon boat racing, I was emceeing large events, I was organizing large events. I'd brought concepts of how to run these more profitably and more beneficially for all the participants to that PR agency, because I thought it would benefit the sport and the city. And I've been involved in like the mayor the mayor campaigns, like voting campaigns and stuff like that. I was very active as an 18, 19, 20-year old. This agency was like, we really think you should come and work for us. And so
Natural kind
that's,
of lock and
yeah,
key and lock kind of fit.
yeah, exactly. And so that's
So
what I did.
so you go from there to England, and then you decide time to become an accountant. From
Basically,
from
after my
like
degree, I did my degree first in England.
right,
But
your
yeah,
degree in
advertising and marketing communications.
right, and then you're like, okay, well-roundedness. And so were you, when you went towards accounting, was there any part of that, was it sort of like, man, I want to be well-rounded and I think I would love this, or was it exclusively like, I should do this to be well-rounded?
Yeah, actually, I would say that it's in part at the I was a little bit swayed by a very, very loving mentor that I'm still connected with, a professor at the university that I studied at, because I was standing at the wrong desk on enrollment day, and he thought I was enrolling for accounting and finance. I'm like, no, 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 no. So this is kind of how we met. And I said, oh no, I'm no good with numbers, but I ended up doing really well in my degree, but also in the finance modules. And
Right.
so at some point he said, maybe you should think about finance as a career. And what I did like was, it would really challenge me. Like, it was not in my comfort zone, but I really liked the idea of working for larger blue chip companies, getting some good brand names onto my CV. And I
Kind of
ended
like the
up working.
Procter and Gamble that you didn't want to work for.
Right, but in this case, it was PricewaterhouseCoopers, right? So it was
Right.
like number one financial services firm in the world, and I remember just, this is actually a whole other story, but I ended up getting fired from that 18 months in, but
Mm.
I lost with that so much prestige. I loved the prestige of working at
Aha.
an accountancy firm and being able to say I'm a CPA or a chartered accountant,
And
right?
did you enjoy the work itself?
No,
Got it. So
no,
you love the prestige, sort of the accoutrement
yeah.
around it, but not so much the actual work.
Now, what I did love,
Interesting.
and which again was like when you look back, how Steve Jobs always talks about the dots aligning in hindsight.
Right.
What I did love about the job was all the personal development stuff that they do, because PwC is fantastic at developing their talent, and there was always good programs for younger people to get involved
Right.
and to do leadership type things. And the other piece was that I had always been the person to ask the questions in journalism,
Hmm.
in my life before that, and then in finance and audit. It was all about building a really trusting, respectful relationship with the business owners and asking them detailed, deep questions. And
Here's the start
so
of coaching.
here's the start of coaching
Uh-huh. Yeah,
for
bringing
me.
curiosity to the table. Okay, so
Yeah.
you're doing this, you get your ass fired. That's from
Hmm.
doing cocaine in the bathroom? Is that
No, I wish.
photocopying your ass, something like that?
No, I did. It takes 10 exams to become a chartered accountant, and then plus some time qualifying.
You
And
got
I had
British there.
failed. I know, right? Oh,
Qualification.
I'm working so hard not to anymore. I can't even do it. But I do say things still in the British accent. Anyway, um, I did fail the second to last exam twice. upon which I
Mm.
was called into the office of the training manager, and he said, I'm really sorry you failed this exam. It was advanced finance. It's no joke. Like these exams are like the law,
Uh-huh.
bar exams,
Yeah.
like super hard exams, 6 hours long.
Yeah.
And he was like, we're going to have to terminate your contract. Conveniently, it was February of 2008, and they
So you're
fired with,
5 years in ish.
yeah, no,
No,
yeah,
18 months in because you did
yeah,
your
into
degree. That's
18
right.
months.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. 2006 to 2008, 18. But the reason why I say conveniently is because three other people got fired with me out of the same program because they were reducing their staff at the time because they
Right.
were preparing for what was to come in 2008.
Aha.
So and of course they had every right to fire me at this point, but I was like, after being like super depressed and working my way through the grief cycle, being angry and
Yeah.
just like embarrassed, like I was so ashamed, you know
Uh-huh.
to have been fired from something for the first time ever, especially out of that. uh, I was determined though to continue with the qualification, to resit that stupid ass
Mm.
exam again if I had to do it, 5 more times. I passed it at the next attempt, passed my final exam at the next attempt after that. But I
Now I
did
can do the
find,
thing I don't really love that much. I've
right
showed the
now,
world.
now exactly. No, but there's like in my being, there's this not quitting, right? Like,
Yes.
and I was like, I was too far along. I paid too hard a price to just quit
Yep.
at that point. And, I was determined on finding an area of finance that I would like more. And I actually ended up being taken on by another accountancy firm with, they were open arms. If you come from PwC, they were very, very generous and really helped me through the final stages
Mm.
of qualifying. I will never never forget what they've done for me, really.
Right.
But I ended up working at my last corporate job was with Experian, and it was on secondment. And so I really started to find work that was less in the detail of finance and
Yeah.
audit and that sort of thing, and more with people. But I ended
Hold
up like,
on. So let me ask,
mhm.
where are we in what year is it now when you're
This is
working
now
there?
2009-10.
So you're surfing through the financial collapse, the recession and everything. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And working at Experience in Nottingham in the UK was a good time because I had really fantastic managers there that were really willing to like work with me to get the most out of me. Um, but at the same time, I was like really starting to have this like Monday blues feeling of, "Oh, I don't
Uh-huh.
really want to." I was dreading Mondays, looking forward to the weekends. I didn't love the actual work. I loved everything about it. Like, I loved the people, loved the
Hmm.
organization, but I just didn't really like the work. And
It's
that's
like
what,
the best version that this could be.
yeah,
Yeah.
the best
Yeah.
version of like a personally created prison.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Yeah. It's a
Great
beautiful
pay,
cage, still in a
gorgeous
cage.
cage. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Beautiful cage, company car, all the insurances, all the perks on paper,
Uh-huh.
great team, great prospects for leadership. And I really, even at PwC, I thought one day I'm going to be partner because it was just so compelling and clear and easy, and I'm quite structured
Totally. And the
that I
path
would
is
have
laid
like
out for
it
you. Yeah. I know it
totally.
well. Yeah.
Absolutely. I can totally imagine you do. And so I was really compelled by that. And so when it came to, what transition happened in 2010, or 2009, when I started to hire a life coach for myself for the first time, was
Let's talk
really that
about
I
that
was,
for a moment.
yeah.
So you're, and maybe you were about to explain this, but you're
Hmm.
kind of getting the Monday blues. What's the cat? Because for me, I really believe it's there's a degree of vulnerability to hire a coach. There's sort of like
Hmm.
an admission internally. I maybe can't solve this completely on my own. And for people like
100%.
you and myself, we don't tend to like that. We tend to be very good at solving stuff on our own. So what's the catalyst, that the spark that allows you to make that step or that pushes you forward into that?
I think if I'm being truthful, my boyfriend at the time is and still is a stonemason, and
Cool.
he is incredibly gifted and has built incredible things in his lifetime and done wonderful, wonderful jobs for lots of people. Um, the main thing that I always looked at him to was just how passionate he was about the work. And
Mm-hmm.
he would forget to eat, sleep, and drink, and just because he was so in it and he loved it so much. And so when I looked at him, I was like, I want that. I want something
Uh-huh.
where I forget my time and where I'm in flow and I'm loving doing it. And I think that was a large catalyst. And then I was, at this point, I think I read about it in the Psychologies magazine in the UK that there was like a careers fair going on in London. So I was
Mm.
like, what do I got to lose? So I went, and that's where I met the life coach. I had no idea what that was. I'd never heard about any one of them,
They
but
just
we
had like
got,
a booth.
yeah, exactly.
Yep.
But we just got chatting, and she was a young woman, and was pregnant with a huge belly, and so we just
Yeah.
started chatting, and it was like, for me, like I felt like I had done everything to try to figure out how to use my language skills, my marketing background and studies, and then my finance background, but I could not come up with anything that would where I would have confidence that it would make me happy. And
Hmm.
so I was very
Let me
much
make
open
sure
at
I
that
let me
point.
unpack that. So
Hmm.
so despite all of your brainstorming, all of your trying to figure out, you're like, none of this I really believe is going to leave me feeling happy. Is that
Yeah,
right?
100%. I
Uh-huh.
knew that
Got
for
it.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew that for sure, but what makes it so hard is, right, at that time, you know the cage you're in and it's decent. It's
Hmm.
like that's like the worst. It's like the golden handcuffs, right? You know
Yes.
it's decent, and you know we have good prospects, but it's just, I think, in part because one of the reasons why we're unschooling my daughters, our children, is because I think the school system kind of takes out of you to figure out what you're interested in and passionate about. So I
Yes.
was like, I felt very led my whole
Hmm.
life. You're supposed to like this, and this.
Here's what
Sports
you
and
should
things is,
do.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Sports is a little different. My mom was very encouraging for us to try everything, but with like the professional route, it felt very guided.
Yeah.
And so when I came to that point of like, I don't like this, but I don't know what I would like instead, I felt actually quite open and like coachable, right, by this
Uh-huh.
lady. But it was really what turned it around in that for me, rather than look for a job description or like a title that I would like to become, as an employee,
Hmm.
she kind of started to ask more questions about, well, what's the life you want to live?
Mm-hmm.
How do you want work to feature in your life? And one of the things I was really
Which, if I may,
mm,
is like such a beauty in that question because it's really it's architecting what you want from the very ground up, as
absolutely.
opposed to like, what are the positions and then which best lands in the
Hmm.
buckets of what I want in my life. Uh-huh.
100%. And it
Yeah.
makes a big difference, because it's so, when you look for job descriptions, there's always going to be something that you're not going to like about it, right? Like it's
Totally.
very blinkered.
Yeah.
Like it's really hard to find something that you love. But what it opened up for her to ask that question was really for me to think about, well, I don't want to really commute like I used to do. I don't want to be away weeks on end for clients, at clients' assignments. I don't really want to work for 40 hours a work week either. Like,
Totally.
and so it really brought out like what's the kind of life I want to lead. And self-employment was sort of on the cards pretty quickly, but I was also really dismissive, very scared of doing that because my partner was, right? So I didn't want
Your partner
two
was what?
people.
Dismissive or
Self-employed.
doing that?
No, no, no,
Got it.
self-employed. So I didn't want to have like two people with like variable income, or having to struggle to get business or whatever. We were
So
still
it's the
building his
lack of
business.
certainty,
Oh
the
yeah.
lack of the guiding path in a way
Hmm.
was,
Hmm.
yeah, that I love that, like how the thing that you're kind of not wanting is also a little bit the thing holding you in the thing you don't want.
A hundred
It's sort of,
percent.
we fight it, but we also, yeah, I love the safety of this cage, but I fucking hate the cage. Yeah, it makes total sense.
I
Yeah.
think a lot of people find themselves, right? Like everybody who's trying to somewhat escape cubicle nation will have some variation of that experience, I think.
Yes.
Well, not everybody, but lots of people do. In any case, for me, it was it went on for a little while. Like I was probably coaching with her for like 9 months by the time that this moment happened, which was that in my job when I was still working at Experian and with my beautiful manager at the time, um, she and I had sat down and talked a little about what would she do if if she hadn't become an accountant, if she didn't do finance.
So
And
are you like fishing a little bit in that question? Sort of like what, or was it purely just
it
open
was just,
curiosity?
I was actually like, without realizing, I was kind of coaching her
Right.
just
Asking
out of
similar
curiosity.
questions to what
Yeah.
she was asking. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, and just sharing about my journey. And so, she knew I was pretty open with her. She knew that I was like trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So I asked her what she would do, and she said, "Oh, I'd have a garden center." Like it was immediate answer.
Straight up right
And
there. Yeah.
and I was like, "Wow, that's amazing." And so we started calling it like Project Sunflower. We started talking about it. And when I told my coach about this, she said, "Well, that sounds an awful lot like coaching. Have you thought about that for a career?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I could never do that. Then I'd be like your competition. That'd be weird." And,
There can only be
no,
one
no,
coach in the world, and it's you.
right. But that was literally what I said at the time.
Yes, of course.
And so, but then we put the phone down that day, and within 4 days, I had registered for my training. I set up my
Mm.
website. Like I was like, I was in love with the idea because I knew that I could learn and grow and develop for a living.
Aha, aha. So it sounds like you had quite a good shepherd into
Yeah,
this profession. It's like the coach you got initially was at least sounds trained fairly,
yeah, she
like
was.
she was
Yeah.
actually asking questions below the surface. What a
Hmm.
gift to like,
Yeah,
because I know a lot of people, because of the nature of the coaching profession, so much of it is watery and diluted. That's their experience, and then they kind of bounce out of it. They're like,
yeah,
ah, so that's quite a
absolutely.
blessing.
Absolutely. And she's still
Uh,
around and she's still coaching. And I think because of her and her being, sort of having gone through accredited training and because of my previous accredited, training as a CPA, I was really intent on being ICF accredited with my training and stuff like that. So it just moved
uh,
me into a more professional um, direction to begin with. And as you may know from the Forge, um, professionalism is one of my defense mechanisms, right? Like
right.
I will live or, I will basically die for looking professional.
Uh-huh.
So, it was like even then I can see it, how I wasn't just going to be a 3-day weekend course kind of life coach.
You're going to do
And
this right.
I wanted to do it right.
Uh-huh. And who did you train with? Was it CTI?
No, actually, I wish I'd known about CTI at the time. It was a smaller company that was actually based up in Scotland, but it was ICF
Uh-huh.
accredited training. They don't exist
Uh-huh.
anymore, sadly.
Oh, that's too bad. They just closed down, stopped doing their
Yeah.
work. Huh,
Hmm.
interesting.
I just went
And how
into
long was
something
that
else.
training?
Oh gosh, that went on over I want to say 9 months. I
I love
basically
it.
once I started with that idea, it was like 10. I prepared my exit for 10 months out of experience. So most of that
Uh-huh.
was training, and I took my first paying client. I never had like not paying client, like as a first client. I did later do some free coaching, but
Yeah.
I took on my very first client who was actually the IT director at one of my PwC clients. So
Amazing. And what,
mhm.
if you're willing to share, what was the rate you charged for your first
50,
paying client?
£50 a session.
Uh-huh. But you were doing per session?
Yeah.
Yeah. Schedule like the next session at the end of the last session, that kind of
Yep,
thing? Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love where we start.
Oh my
We
gosh,
start to learn, oh, this doesn't
humbling.
serve the client. But
No, but we're still connected on LinkedIn, and he just commented the other day on something and said, I would forever be grateful for your coaching at the time. It was brilliant. So it doesn't,
totally.
it doesn't matter, but it was, yeah, very cute. I quickly raised my rates to over 100, but yeah, 50 was
Yeah.
50, 75, and then 100, 125
I think this is so
humble
important
beginnings.
to be a leader as coach and coach as leader, where we have to be a work in progress. So if someone comes in, they're
Hmm.
like, I'm going to charge $100,000 right out of the gate. They often aren't willing to be at that point where they're just a work in pro. They're learning the ropes. They don't have the being
Yeah.
to charge those sort of rates.
Mm.
And there is such value in starting there. That, my first, I remember, I think I got paid like $5 or $20, something like
Mm.
very humble, and it was a gift to that person, and it was a gift to me to
Hmm.
begin there. And then we want to be working with our own coaches, getting developed,
Exactly.
so that we don't stay there forever. There's nothing wrong with staying anywhere, but like the heart and soul of this work is that our lives and who we're being in our lives transforms over
Hmm.
time. So we want both sides of that.
And I will say safely, I have raised my rates almost, I would say, I don't know 100%, but most of the time I was working with a coach at the time.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So
So
I,
what
just not willy-nilly. Hmm.
did that, because a lot, let me find the right words. was going to say an epidemic, but that's not the right word. But there's just like an anemia in the coaching profession, which is that most coaches aren't really willing to do that, to work with a coach. They're not enrolled and working with their own coach. And consequently, it's really hard for them to enroll anyone else because they're not really
Hmm.
buying what they're selling. And so
Hmm.
what was there a mindset? Was there like what had you start out of the gate being a yes to that, to this work, to choosing into it right out of the, aside
I
from the
mean,
person that
it's,
you first worked with?
yeah, I mean, it's kind of that, right? Like I felt I had so much progress, and
Uh-huh.
positive experience from it. And there were some times where I would like go for a few months without, but it was always like, okay, I've gotten this. And, usually I would work with people like probably a year and longer.
Yeah.
And then take like a few months to just like regroup, execute. And then, as I'm growing, I would seek other people out again, and also those fees that I started to pay other people also grew, right? That's, I think, the
Yes.
other
Yeah.
part is really important. Like, so as I'm growing my fees, like, I'm looking to working with you. So my rates aren't quite where yours are, but I need to like, I feel like I need to have had that experience of paying as much in order to move into that direction of charging that much.
Uh-huh.
So over the years, I guess every time I hired somebody, it was like a little bit more expensive, a little bit more expensive,
Yes.
and lots of lessons learned, some better, some not. But,
Yes.
I think that's quite normal. But I think in the last year, because we're here to talk about the Forge also, over the whole last year, I probably invested about $40,000 in my own coaching and development.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it
And
starts to, I remember when I first began my journey, one of the first things I did was I went to one of my best friends, and I said, he was very talented as a designer. And so I
hmm.
said, hey, like, how about I coach you a little bit and then you help me design like graphic stuff like that and just figure out my business, how this is going to
Hmm.
work, which was awesome. We still use his logo and the company name we created and all of that for our corporate entity. But I was sitting down with him and we were talking about uh, like the fees I was going to charge to begin with, which
Hmm.
was $500 a month, 3-month minimum commitment. So $1,500, not a huge stretch of money really for here in like our Western culture.
Hmm.
Most of us will throw that away on like a TV or whatever, but it's enough money that it like arrests our thinking. We have to stop and be like, oh, that's actually going to require something from me. But I
Hmm.
remember when I was sitting this, he said, okay, got it. So you're going to be positioning yourself as a luxury product. And I was like,
Hmm.
huh, that's interesting because that's not how I'm holding it.
Yeah,
And
that is interesting.
um, these days, like you described, like probably probably at least $100,000 is what Bay and I both invest back into our work. And
Sure.
people sometimes are like, I'll have friends reach out or people that I connected with at the beginning of my journey. And then like 10 years later, they reach out and they're like, wow, you really look like you've 10x'd your life. 10xing was
Mm.
popular for a while. You've 10x'd it. Can you help me understand what you've done? And
Yeah.
I'll describe what my life looks like now. They're like, that's crazy. I could never start there. And it's like, great, start there. Like begin
Right.
making the $500. That's how you 10x your life, is you start
Yeah.
making those investments and then you build on them to the
Yeah.
point where, yeah, that's a lot of money to put in, but like it always comes back when we're investing in
Hmm.
our being and all of that. So,
It's also
okay.
about, isn't it, the value? Just one final thought on
Yeah.
that. The value of coaching is always interesting for me because in my family, for example, my mom last year, when I had, if I took on three 35K clients last year, and she was like, so basically, instead of buying a car, they're talking to you for a year. You know?
Yeah.
So I mean, I can kind of laugh about it now, but I was like, it's clear that some people cannot quite see the value of that, but it's also
Yes.
because it's out of context without the
Yes.
prior 10, 12 years of like progress, right? They
That's right.
know that that's not where I started. But my mom initially was like comparing it a little bit with like call center work, because I was talking about having calls with my clients, like, so there's
Yeah.
like it depends, who you're speaking to. But I certainly, whenever I've raised my rates, like I was sweating beads, like I was,
Yeah.
it wasn't, it's definitely uncomfortable. So I think, yeah, it's just part of the journey.
I love that the way my dad holds it is like, boy, there must be a lot of people that these people just must be really messed up. to pay you that much money
Oh,
to
interesting.
just talk to you. And because that's the only reason my dad would make that, like, he just
Yeah.
doesn't, to your point, the word you used is context. He doesn't have a context
Yeah.
in which this kind of investment in yourself would reap such benefits that
Hmm.
you would do it not from a place of being messed up. You would do it from a place of like, I am this committed to living a life this full and rich.
Right.
And um, that's that's a that's how that was my upbringing too. You know, I
Mhm.
can do it all on my own. Now, of course, he'll invest that much money to make more money.
Right.
The funny thing is he has more money than he could possibly ever spend. My parents are very thrifty, but they've been wise with their money. He has more money than he can possibly ever spend, and he puts a lot of attention on making more of it. What for, Dad? What do you want to do
He
with
should
that
read the
money?
Die with Zero book, right? Like where it's about
Yeah,
like spending it while you're here, don't save it
that's
up.
right. Yeah. Or the other
Yeah,
book I really liked was Lynn Twist's The Soul of Money, and just
I
the
love that too.
concept of, money as a conduit. We want it to be a
Yeah,
flow like a river. It comes
yeah,
in and it comes out, and we're trying to just
absolutely.
widen the banks of our river. Okay, so how do you get from all of this to the Samurai Coaching Dojo? What leads you there?
Okay, so Samurai Coaching Dojo, that the year that I joined was 2018, right? So that was actually an interesting time
Weighs
because
in.
it was ways in, and I had done 3 years at Tony Robbins as a coach, as a master coach in
Uh-huh.
RI between 2012 and 2015, which, look at me, here I'm going back to a form of structure,
Uh-huh.
but it gave me so much confidence and thousands of coaching hours in three
Oh, I'm
years.
sure. Yeah.
And so that was actually really, really useful for me. It was like training on steroids. I was just talking to my
Did you go to a
head of,
lot of his events?
I've done all of them and several
Uh-huh.
times over. Yeah.
Right. You clap and very
I just
energetic. Yeah.
posted a video about that today where we went like this for limiting beliefs, like to try to get rid of them. Like my headline was
Love
like,
it.
what other crazy shit have you done to, get rid of your
Yeah.
limiting beliefs? But it was useful at the time because it really helped me create confidence in my coaching, and I felt like I could
Yes.
really coach anyone and anything between 20 years and 71 years was my oldest client all over the world. So that was useful. But I
Yeah.
came to the point in 2015 when I was creating my own conference, personal development conference in Europe, that I felt like it was getting too much. Like I had 55 clients, some private, and then the rest
55
public.
clients.
Yes.
Holy mackerel, Jana. That is
35,
insane.
35 clients or 35 clients through Robbins, and then my own personal clients, and Alive on top, the Alive and Building conference. And I was like, I asked Robbins, like, please, can I not get any more clients? Because like I'm full, like at capacity. And my mentor and boss at the time was like, this is a question of and. This is how you challenge and grow yourself,
Ay.
like grow
Uh-huh.
yourself. It's good, this and this. And I was like, no, I'm out. So mostly
Can I
because,
speak to that before
yeah.
before we move off of it? I had that too in the training I used to lead, and this is what I call like the ontological trap. So the ontological answer would be like there is some internal story, belief, whatever, that is making it so that all of the people you're working with is creating busyness. It's too
Hmm.
much. And if you
Hmm.
just do the internal work, the ontological work, address your being, then you will be able to be with all of this in your life and it won't be too much. And the trap in that, I think, is yes, there's always a breakthrough we can create internally that will allow a certain thing, but we also have to look at the phenomenology of our life. I always have trouble with that word, which is how many people do I want to work with? And
Right.
yeah, I can be totally at peace working in the middle of a dungeon on the negative
Hmm.
13th floor of a dingy office building. I can do
Hmm.
that, but is that what I would choose?
Right.
No, I would choose to be surfing and hanging out at the beach and maybe taking 3 calls a day. So I love that they
And
kind of gave you
I
that.
did
And
both. I actually did
uh-huh.
both because I did for about, I'm trying to think, like from mid. So my first conference was in May 2014. And so for about 9 months prior to that, I had those, like I had done the double shifts, like I had done the coaching
Yeah.
and I did that well into 2015. So for, 2 years, I grew myself to that capacity, but then came the point of choice because the
Uh-huh.
other piece was, no matter how, how great the aspects were of Robbins and working there, it felt like if I wanted my time back, the only way to do it is to stop that and
Yeah.
have 2 or 3 clients at like a decent rate, like 1,500 a month, 1,000 a month or something, that would make up the same amount of money. So it like just
Aha.
became a complete no-brainer. I think people that, stay in the structure for long, they are relating to it slightly differently because they enjoy, like some of our colleagues had like 80, 90, 100 clients. And that's just, to me, the capacity for coaching was just intense. But I also resented that I only had like 30, 45 minutes with each client. And,
Yeah,
if you have 12 calls back to back on a day, then there's only so much you can give. And I wanted to go
totally.
deeper.
That's right. Yeah. So while this is happening, what's your internal state? Like, how are you feeling about life and what you're up to and the structure of your life as you're doing all of this?
So this at this time, 2014, 15, was also when I got divorced. So
Oof.
yeah, so there's a lot going on. So I
Yes.
created a lovely personal development conference for myself that really led to, like, I mean, I basically created it for myself in order to change my life massively, along with the other 200 people that came to attend. Um, we had some amazing speakers that were just like, you couldn't help but be transformed by. And it was a year where I think I started, you asked me about my tattoo when we were still off the live, and it says
Yeah.
alive because what I wanted to feel in life is alive. And I was dying in my marriage. I was dying in the accounting
Mm,
job before that. And I was like slowly dying within the Robbins construct with all this much coaching. And so
right.
I chose to, that I remember clearly that I had identified for myself that I had this limiting belief where my East German maybe upbringing was you work hard and
Uh-huh.
you earn a lot. If
Yeah.
you do not, if you have fun, or you're basically or an artist and creative, like you don't earn.
Superfluous. Yeah. You got
Right.
to work hard and you'll make a lot of money if you
Yeah.
do. So
So,
let
but
me let me go ahead. Go
so
ahead and then I'll
no,
check
that's
in.
okay. It's okay.
So prior you had the good life, but you didn't really love what you were doing. And now you've kind of created, like, it's almost like you've shifted the stuff on the surface. You're loving what you're doing, but there's still that underlying experience of like, oh, I'm dying a little bit inside. This is tough.
Yeah. So I
Uh-huh.
basically very intentionally, especially in 2014, 15, decided to pursue everything that would just make me feel alive. And that meant I was
Mm.
leaving Robbins. I was taking the risk financially to be like on my own feet a lot more again. Because remember, I was also digitally nomading through the world at this time. So I was
Right.
like, for 4 years, I had no home, no car, no possessions, just my suitcase and my backpack and my laptop. So, and I liked expensive places. Like I lived in Hawaii for months and, Southeast Asia is probably the cheaper one. But even Bali is like not cheap these days. People don't
Uh-huh.
go to Bali if you think that's going to be cheap, because if you want Western nice things and restaurants and stuff, it's not cheap. Anyway, so, I bet on myself. And it was the year that I had rainbow hair, learned to skydive, went to train with David Data and did more tantric work and relationship discovery work. Um, and it's how I met my second husband, who I'm now married to. Um, but yeah, just put like I was trying to test a hypothesis. Could I make more money if I had
Mm.
more fun?
Mm-hmm.
So you know how you
Uh-huh.
talked about your concept with fun at the beginning of the call?
Yes.
It was very much like there has to be like in order for me to break out of this, I have to work more and harder to make more money. I needed to prove it to myself that I could basically have a lot of fun. And that meant
Right.
travel, skydiving. I did my skydive licenses and stuff. And it meant pursuing anything and everything and people that would make me feel alive.
So there's a real act of courage here where you're stepping outside of the context
Hmm.
you've grown up in to see, like, I actually want to create the both and I want to have fun and make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Let me interject a question here that Seth, thanks for your question. Seth says, do you guys think that this is an important step, the having a ton of clients to practice before pulling back once you're a master? And he says he's
Mm-hmm.
closer to starting out. So should he find a way to inundate himself with clients? So what do you think, Jana? And then I'll provide my answer.
I mean, I'll actually dial back to my first year as a coach to answer that question because I felt like the main reason why I coached 50% of my clients in the first year for free and 50% paid was because I wanted to create referrals. I wanted people to experience the power of coaching because I absolutely believed in it. and I was willing to, because what else was I going to do? I was trying to build a business, so I might as well coach people, but I picked them. Like I would have them apply and stuff like that. Um, so do you have to, like, I think in the first year I coached like 151 people, you know, um, but do you have to do thousands of sessions like with Robbins? Probably not, I don't think.
Uh,
For me, it was useful because it just opened my eyes to like the breadth of really the content versus the context, like how to help somebody, no matter their content and stories and stuff like that.
well said. I started out with quite a few, never like what you were doing. Like I think my top load might have been around 20 clients, which was a lot.
That's a lot.
But I don't think, Seth, that you necessarily have to like go, well, let me start back. What coaches need to do early on is coach a bunch.
Mhm.
That's really important, because what gets in the way of most coaches breaking out and becoming successful entrepreneurs is that they're scared, and then they just don't really coach that many people. And then you don't learn how to ride a bike by getting on the bike once a year. You have to get on every single day, and you have to fall off of it. So I think that part's really important, but I don't think it's worth creating like a strategy to try to
Mhm.
create a whole ton of clients. Your path will be your path. Jana and I, we're both pretty similar. So of course our path is going to be like, let's get all the clients and then we'll be happy. And then we're like, this fucking sucks. I don't want to do this anymore.
That's right.
That we had to learn that lesson that way. Whereas for
Yeah.
other people, that might not be the lesson. So I don't think it's something you have to aim towards. And the
Mhm.
beauty of all of this, in my opinion, is we don't have to figure any of this out. We just have to work with a coach. And then what's
I
going to
was just going to
happen?
say the same thing. That yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was going to happen? You finish your
What's
thought.
going to happen is we're going to show up with our coach and be like, well, I'm working really hard and it's super busy, but I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm good. And our coach will be like, you seem kind of stressed. Well, yeah, I'm kind of stressed, but I'm actually all right. It's fine. It's good. And then slowly we'll get to like, yeah, I'm not having fun and I don't like it and I don't want to work with this many people. And then that conversation
Mhm.
will open up and we will discover ourselves in our process, which then allows us to create what's next.
Yeah, and I would say to Seth also that for me, like a pet peeve is if people start to go into business as coaches without coach training, and I mean like real coach training,
Yeah.
CTI, AC, like any of the like really good schools. So I feel like no matter how many clients one would want to take on initially, it's just as equally important to actually have a coach, to have the experience at the receiving end, to be
Yes.
coachable, to be reflected upon. Because I've learned so much from being coached about how I wanted to be coached also.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Okay, so great question, Seth. Thank you. So you find your way, you finish with Robbins, Medane's, whatever it is, training, you move on, you're being crazy, you've got rainbow colored hair, and then you find your way into the Samurai Coaching Dojo.
Right. And so yeah, that was basically after immigrating to the US. I learned about Toku from a podcast, Coaches Rising, which is I think a
Uh-huh.
Brit who runs it. And I heard him on the podcast, and I was like, this guy is an actual coach. Like I like
Uh-huh.
his way of thinking, because I just have pet peeves for like assumptions and judgment and coaching and stuff like that. So you could tell he was very clean and clear in his style. And so I had a conversation with him. That's how I fell into it. And at this point, also, it had been a little while really that I had invested in coach training per
Mm,
se. So I did both the sales dojo and the coaching dojo. And I really liked the challenge of being coach in front of a group again, which I had done at RI before, Robbins Research International, before in my training days, right? Because they make you take a live client in front of a group,
uh-huh.
as you're finishing your training and stuff. But I really like the idea of doing that as a practice because you're so in isolation, right? When you're working as a coach, you don't know your ticks and your things that you do and that, are maybe not as clean or where you're like just not as powerful as a coach. And so I wanted to be in that environment of practice. And obviously that's all what the dojo was about. And the
Right.
other piece I did in 2018 was training with NLP Marin
That's
in
right.
San and so I had invested again that year pretty heavily into my training because I was also like running up to like I was pregnant in the time. So I knew that my time was going to be restricted. So I packed a lot into 2018. Plus, it was a year that we settled in the US and I didn't have a work permit for a while. So I had to like, keep things a little bit under wraps. I still had my UK business going at the time. And so it was like a good investment of my time, I felt at that point in my life. And then my
Right.
firstborn came around at the end of 2018.
Uh-huh. And so, so like, let's discuss how, because you initially after the dojo thought about working together with me, and we had like
Mhm.
some, I don't know what we'd call it. Drama is too strong a word, but like we kind of bumped into each other. Would you say that's a fair way to describe it?
I honestly don't remember. I don't remember it like badly, at least. Like I know that you challenged me and like yeah, I don't know exactly what you're referring to even. Does that say a lot, right?
It's great. Well, so what I
Go
remember
on,
is
bring it
like,
on. Yeah. Go on.
you'd reached out and said like, could we have a conversation? Said yes, and like, uh, whatever showed up, like for you, there was sort of you couldn't hear me, or I wasn't speaking in a way that you could hear.
Hmm.
And my recollection is it kind of left you feeling a little bit like, is this guy really legit? Like, I thought he might have had something, but maybe not. And then we had a call to clean that up, is my
I
recollection.
remember
Does
the
this?
clean, yeah, I remember the
Mhm.
cleaning up. I think it's in part like, and it actually came up again in the Forge, which was about feeling misunderstood or like not really truly understood.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I certainly don't remember it negatively. And I don't think it had me question your professionalism per se. In fact, if anything, I learned a lot from that cleanup exercise and hearing you talk about cleaning up your side of the street. I'm like, that's definitely from you that I have that, and
Mm.
whenever I do that now. But I think it just didn't feel like, yeah, it didn't feel like the right time or the right like fit at that time, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I remember that. And then I think I got a little bit sidetracked with the NLP world because that really was very insightful for me. And I had amazing teachers there. And I went back to the sales dojo also. So I felt like I had just a lot going on
A lot
training
going on.
wise
Yeah.
already while being pregnant. And then let's see. I know we've talked a few times over the years. And when the Forge question came up last spring, as an offer because I had followed you and Bay then since, right? Like since
Right.
2018, and I really like what you guys put out. It was really this would be a really like a very feasible way for me to get more exposure to your coaching, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
instead of paying like several tens of thousands, which I couldn't really figure out how I would do that at the time, it
Yeah.
was um, here's another good time in my life where I can do some personal training, like actual training work, not just being coached, because they're like different, I feel
Yes.
like.
Totally. Yeah.
And as you know, I paired that with coaching with Rachel and then the Forge. And then I took, another business coach on a little bit like 3 months ago now. So I've had, different ways of working on myself and my goals. And it was actually a really amazing blend, I have to say. Very
Uh-huh.
challenging because I was doing all of this with two very small children and very little sleep. But
Yes.
it was kind of the whole point was what can I do? How much can I be? How much can I be
Yes.
while also being this sleep deprived? Because I felt like I
Right.
had lost a lot of myself, in this early motherhood.
I want to talk about that, but before we go there, so there's like one of the consistent themes in your story is like this real willingness, almost like this ability to perceive like there is a benefit or this is a good time, this is a moment to like lean into this.
Hmm.
And hearing your story, I imagine some people could be like, oh, I just need to like intellectually figure out how to spot that and then just trust it. Because for Jana, it's easy. She just sees that moment and then chooses into it. But I'm
Hmm.
almost certain that's not how it occurs. Like I imagine there's some
Hmm.
fear before
Hmm.
taking that leap. And so can you describe a little bit like just what it's like to be in that process and what it requires from you to choose into these paths that seem to require a fair bit of courage?
Yeah, I honestly, actually, as you know, I haven't really thought about it that way, but I think none of these three hires and experiences over the last year have come easily at all.
Hmm.
Least of all because they all are five figures, like every single
Yeah.
one of those are five-figure investments. And, we've just bought a house, we just moved, we have two small children. And and I had earned a bit less for a couple of years while I had the babies and stuff like that. So um, I think what, like, the honest answer is that there's like, when that happens, there's like a part of me that feels the desire awakened to want to grow again,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't always have. And I honestly had no energy for the first like 3 years of my kids' life. I just, like, I could barely like manage my daily life and my handful
Mm-hmm.
of clients that I kept, in that time, because I've always kept my clients that I have had for years now.
Yeah.
And that was all I could do, because I'm also like nursing 2 children and, like, like I said, toddler life.
Yeah.
But I think, so while that one part wants to, like, that's almost like the more masculine side that creates like the focus and the drive in a direction that
Yes.
I cannot turn off. Like, I cannot turn off wanting better for myself,
Yeah.
more for us as a family, even now, right? And so that's there. But then there's also, in a way, because I felt fear to choose into the coaching, to choose into the forge, um, I know that I kind of have to. Like, I
Huh.
have to kind of go there if I want to grow. So I guess in some ways, I've come to appreciate over the years that the growth just does really lie outside of the comfort zone. But
Right.
it's really, is really, I mean, it sounds so simple, but it just is.
Yeah.
And so every time saying yes to these kinds of opportunities, and the financial investment, the time investment was like a big question mark for me.
Right.
Because I needed to start to hire, babysitters and, like, figure all of this out with my parenting alongside. So it wasn't just about the money, but I think there is a recognition that if it kind of looks a little bit uncomfortable, and even the dojo, coaching in front of a group of people, as a simple example, was to an extent uncomfortable,
Uh-huh.
then it is something where I know I will come out as a different person,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I
And
feel
that,
driven.
it sounds like that's where you choose from, as
Yeah,
opposed to like, how will I stay safe, or how will I, there's sort of like this,
yeah,
I'm going to choose from this knowing that I will transform, I will shift by virtue of moving
yeah,
into this.
I think
Uh-huh.
so.
So we don't have too much time left, but like, so you find your way into the forge,
Hmm.
and like, just share some of, obviously you were working with a business coach, with your coach Rachel, who's also my coach currently, and the forge. So you can feel free to aggregate all of it, but like, what's come out of this year
Hmm.
of being
Well,
engaged with
actually,
all of that work?
so I think they actually came in perfect succession of each other. So the business coach, it's very marketing sales focused. That only happened 2 or 3 months ago. So that's
Uh-huh.
kind of on the last end of the forge, and it was born out of something I was pursuing in the forge. But I think the time, especially with Rachel, from April to December, was very much about challenging, what can I actually do? Can I be and have more while I have so little time, so little energy? I'm still
Mm.
figuring out my footing as a new mom, and really struggling with, like, grieving the parts of myself that I lost. Like, even just time, sleep, very simple things, always being attached to a kid is just exceptionally draining.
Uh-huh.
And so with her, um, like, one of the 4 projects that I was working on, and I'm happy to talk about them. Like, one was about business growth. One was about my relationship with my husband, kind of like protecting, bringing that back a little bit. One was about physical exercise and weight and shaping up. And then the last one was honing my coaching skills. So I
Mm.
knew that I wanted to create, and develop in that way. And so when the Forge came around, it was just like, oh yeah, that's perfect, right? Like, that's a great
Right.
fit. Because although I didn't know at all what to expect from it, really, honestly, from the website or
I
even our
remember.
conversation at the time, I was like, okay, that sounds great, whatever, I'm in. But it just seemed to fit the purpose of that. That's all I needed to know.
Right.
And as part of the Forge, my project was very much around, um, I wanted to, for the first time in my life, like create my practice just more proactively, my
Mm,
business more, and make it more into an actual business. So what I felt like I'd had for 13 years was a very nice, created, self-created, um, self-employed job, right? But it
aha,
meant that if I wasn't working, I wasn't getting paid. And
right.
there's only so much time capacity that we have, and that means it's somewhat limited as to what we can do. And even though I'd raised my rates to then 35K, which was part of my coaching work also, it still was going to be limited at some point as to how many people I wanted to take on. And as you
Right.
know, I want to live an unschooling life with my family, meaning that we don't send our kids to school. It meant that time was always going to be super precious, and that I
Yeah.
wasn't going to do 40 hours or 20 hours or however much a week. And so within the Forge, I wanted to create a structure that would have me being more at cause really of creating leads as and when I wanted to, or money as and when I wanted to. And so creating a lead generation structure, creating even just the conversations with new clients again. Like I just felt like I had done nothing of that for a long time. My business was
Mm,
entirely referral based, word of mouth based for years at this point. Really, whenever I started at Robbins at 2012, all of these marketing things kind of went out the window, and I just like
right.
it was all just word of mouth and past clients and Robbins clients recommending people, former clients, that sort of thing. But it always meant like I wasn't at the cause of that. Like I was
Right.
only ever
Yeah.
like receiving when they were coming, but it didn't mean like I could be a cause. So
It was
um
good when it worked and was
yeah,
aligned. Like it was good when what was coming worked for what you wanted. But if you wanted to be able to turn the dial up or down, you didn't have
I
much
didn't have a
capacity.
dial. I
Aha,
didn't have a
that's
dial.
right.
And I never really had created a dial, and I had to overcome a lot of stuff that,
Right.
it's funny because, I obviously studied advertising marketing, right? Remember back in 2003 and 6. But I hate most of what coaches do for marketing,
Yes.
and lots of it felt really ick. So that was a lot of conversations I had last year around what would feel authentic for me and stuff like that. So as part of the work, I started a podcast with a colleague of mine that was a client before from the UK, that's Coaching Skills for Leaders. And because we had actually taught courses in corporate in the last 2 years prior to that of the same topic. And people really liked it. So we were like, oh, there's something here.
Yeah.
People don't all want to be coaches, but leaders could really benefit from learning coaching skills, but like you're doing, right?
Yes.
Like, and so that really took off. So that was part of the project to get that set up by January 1st. And then the reason why I ended up hiring another coach for like it's just a 3-month thing, but it was very much around a system and a structure of creating sales and leads. And that led me down a whole other um, path of thinking about business because I realized that what I wanted wasn't a coaching practice. What I want is an online business. And
Aha.
it is starting to then, it meant that I had to like get really uncomfortable being visible, producing online content. And one thing that I'm still grappling with now is in order to make that transition, I have to become a teacher also.
Right.
And I love coaching, and I know I'm great at coaching, but it's just that to me for years I felt like I can't teach the stuff because it's always with an individual, it's always asking questions. So how do you
Yes.
teach it, right? I don't come from your training background in that way, so I wasn't, and I found it really hard to formulate or articulate what I was doing and how I was doing it. And so that's the middle that I'm in now. But my goal is to grow to 500,000 business. So you know, it's like I can do that with a few clients that pay a very high fee, but I
Yeah.
realized that I would rather be able to nurture and teach like people from like a wider funnel opening and then have my VIP clients that I kind of
Yeah.
got by way of like referral and luck, but have them be further down the funnel where it's not, you don't go out and you're like starting from cold, you know?
Yes, that's right. You're creating ways for people to be in relationship. Similar to the way
Exactly.
you described the Forge, is a
Yeah.
way for people to be in relationship with us. The other thing about teaching, which I think it's in a way kind of healthy, not to stay, but to start where you were describing teaching, because teaching is the downfall of so many would-be coaches. Because teaching is easy in a manner of speaking, not to do it well, but like to give advice and to like teach people is much easier. It requires less of your being than to sit
Mm-hmm.
with people and let them have their process.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes us feel good, and it's super nurturing to our, very nourishing to our ego. Our ego loves teaching because I'm the expert. You receive my wisdom, my bounty of knowledge. You're probably not going to challenge me because I'm the one that's smart and you're the one that's the student. And so like that you had that initial holdup, I think is just really speaks to your commitment and integrity in this profession. And
Mm-hmm.
now it's cool that you're not stopping there, right? We want to
Right.
then move past it because you're right. Like we can't really coach very well in a soundbite.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the initial way, the first way people start into relationship with us is through a soundbite. Typically they
Mm-hmm.
see something we've posted, one
Totally.
thing. And my social media team is always like, they're really great and like coach me a bit on this. Like, here's what you need to do, Adam. You need to like put in hooks. You need to say something interesting in a minute. And of course, my initial reaction is like, that's impossible. I can't possibly do that. I hate hooks. They're stupid.
Right.
And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to get over myself. Maybe I'll get supported by my coach and then start to practice. And it makes a huge difference because then
Mm-hmm.
people are like, I'm interested in this because I want to know the one thing I'm doing wrong in my leadership. And then, oh, I only had to listen to this guy for 60 seconds. What a relief.
Right.
Those are big
But also,
steps
like
for me.
you're actually speaking to the third piece or the second piece, like besides the teaching for me, that is a huge learning curve and growth this last year, which is to want to learn sales and marketing. Because
Yes. Yeah.
I think, I'm one of those cliched people who's a really great coach and a really bad marketer.
Hmm.
And what pisses me off, if I can say that on your live,
Of
is
course.
that there are really fantastic marketing kind of coaches that are
Yeah.
really bad,
Terrible
like
coaches.
actual coaches, right?
Yeah.
And lots of people who call themselves coaches that aren't actually coaching, and all of that's like a big thing. Why I didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
Does that make
Same.
sense? Like
Same.
out of
Yep.
pride
Absolutely.
almost. And so I was
Yeah.
like, I'm not like them. I'm just going to do it like hush hush and referral only. But I realized that for my impact, I need to become more visible and to create my body of work, which is what I want to do in my 40s. I also need to start developing content and teach and
I
learn
think
business marketing.
I think there's a real like that's really great the way you put that distinction. Great coaches not so good at marketing, and then great marketers not very good at coaching. I think there's a real tragedy in people that are like that like get into this profession because it's kind of buzzy, it's popular right now,
Hmm.
and then create a lot of initial success through marketing.
Hmm.
And the tragedy there is that they they get that initial success and that sort of pushes them further down the path, and it doesn't stop them and have them be like, hold on, why isn't this working? And then
Hmm.
engage with a coach. Instead they do this, and then they just get on the treadmill, and then they're
Hmm.
running faster and faster and faster, and then they inevitably burn themselves out because they're not doing the work to like be able to open and expand more. So then they're
Hmm.
working with 6 million clients, or they're resentful, or they're like, they're fine, they're in the process. Next thing you see from them is like a big pronouncement about how they're no longer coaching and they're just going to focus on selling people's books or whatever. You're like, I'm glad for you, because I think that's actually the path that you really wanted to be on. I don't think coaching
Right.
was really the thing for you. It was just the thing you were selling in the moment. So
Right. Yeah, and my worst is like I totally have respect for fantastic people that lead and teach coaches, but
yes.
coaches who are making millions coaching coaches on how they became a coach or financially successful
Yes.
is like, okay, I get it,
Yes.
and it's important, and I just have my difficulty with that. So that's what I'm
Yeah.
my judgment and where I'm grappling and where I'm having to do my own work and
Mhm.
really finding my voice in that world.
Yes. Yeah. That's beautiful work. That's such valuable work you're doing, because there's a tremendous, the first thing in my training, and it sounds like at least intuitively, if not your training as well, that I got was like, don't worry about marketing. Don't worry about a website. Don't worry about a business card. Go coach people. Start practicing. And so I
Mhm.
built the business from word of mouth, from referral, from serving
Mhm.
people and people getting a taste and experience and then wanting more. And then like you was really stuck in like, I don't want to I don't want to be those people.
Mhm.
And there's a real gift, and maybe we could go as far as to say a bit of a nobility, maybe,
Mhm.
in starting in that place, because it's very honest. You're going and you are simply serving people, and you are trusting that service comes back to you, which I'm happy to say it does in spades.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't want to stop there, because as soon as
Mm-hmm.
we stop there, then there's, as you're breaking through yourself, there's a limitation to what we can create. And those of us really committed to this work as like a life's calling
Mm-hmm.
are committed to like more than just whatever that current capacity is. There's always the next level and then the next level. And so it's a beautiful practice that you're in. I really honor that you're taking that on. And I know it's not easy.
Yeah, I might added, creative challenges that I have my kids at home instead of at preschool, and that's what I'm choosing. So I've really like developed my own little schedule where I'm working between 8 and 9 before my husband starts work. At noon,
Yeah.
I have a slot, and then after he's done work, I have another slot, and that's
Uh-huh.
basically the 15 hours a week that I do my work in.
So are you coaching in those hours, or are you doing creative?
Everything.
Yeah, huh, wow, that is a lot. So you must be very effective at like sitting down and immediately entering your process and then
I
like
would love to
immediately.
say yes, but no. I'm also like on my phone doing like a reel or something when the kids are playing now that they're getting a little older.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do mostly in those slots. I do my client coaching calls as well as prospective client conversations or just meeting people, networking type of things, and the marketing stuff I try to fit in around the edges of wherever I can. But I'm also really learning to embrace that, especially building an online business, I have to be the visionary, and I'm going to need to hire an integrator, a social media person. Like,
Yes.
I cannot, like, if I break down my revenue goal into the hours that I want to work, I must not be doing anything that is priced out at less than $500 an
Yeah.
hour.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting where we start to, one of the things I find really, uh, I guess I'll use the word again, like arresting for me, because the way I was raised was by very, salt of the earth kind of parents. Like my dad grew up, he was born in 1943 in England, right after the end of the war. And my mom grew up in rural Ontario with a farming and preacher kind of
Mm.
household. So like very humble. You don't pay anyone to do work that you can do yourself. And the impact I'm committed to having and that you're describing is such that like that's not an option.
Mhm.
I'm committed to something beyond that. And I actually have to, my childhood training tells me it's arrogant or wasteful or something to look at it this way, but I actually have to look at it through the lens you just described. Like my time is worth a lot of money, and I can't just
Mhm.
go about doing stuff like this. It makes more sense financially to pay
Mhm.
someone to mow the lawn, because I'm not going to
Mhm.
do it anyhow and I hate it.
Actually, in my case, I love mowing the lawn, but
Right.
that's when I do my learning. So I do a lot of
Yes.
audiobooks and stuff in that time. I don't know. I just discovered that passion of mine that I enjoyed the satisfaction of the lawn mowing. But
Yeah.
it's things like video editing is like the first thing I had to
Yes.
outsource. Because I'm just paying them a lot less than I would,
Yeah.
sit there and figure it all out. But yeah, so I
Yeah.
think that mindset shift is like kicking in right now where I'm really learning like I'm moving away from just being myself. I don't really want to have
Yes.
a paid team like as an employment and in the sense of employees, but certainly contractors and paid team members for sure.
Yeah. And this again harkens back to that way we describe money as a river and a conduit.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
let it flow out. The money
Hmm.
flows in and we let it flow out, and we become a source of abundance because we
Hmm.
bring money in and we share it out with the world instead of,
Hmm.
I like the metaphor of like water, because when a pool when water pools and gets stuck, it becomes stagnant and
Stagnant.
mired and poisonous, toxic. And so, yeah,
But
we want
that's
to
a
be
new
letting it
thing, right?
flow.
Like, so if you're a coach at this stage, like myself, this is a new experience that I'm even sharing my income with Stripe. I'm sharing my income with ad spend. I'm
Yes.
sharing my income with, paying a video editor, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And then, you've got to pay 30% in taxes, at least where I'm
Yeah.
at. So it kind of has to be a certain price for me now to
Yeah.
make it worth it. But at the same time, that learning to deal with money in that way, to be like, okay, I'm going to like take half of my actual money that I was paid and I'm paying it towards other things.
Yes.
That was like a growth in and of itself, I honestly have to say.
Yeah. There's real trust and there's some
Yeah.
surrender, because the trust part for me, at least, is like, I'm going to give this all out and I'm going to trust more will flow in,
Yeah.
which the
You
river
really
does
have to bet on
naturally.
yourself.
That's
You
right.
really have
Yeah.
to bet on yourself. Yeah.
And
And figuring
spirit.
it out.
You know, we
Yeah,
trust in spirit, and that like there is a divine direction to all
absolutely.
of this.
Yeah,
Let's wind down there, so that you've probably kept you much past your
it's
allotted.
fine.
It's probably going to be a very expensive call that we've just had for you.
My babysitter is getting paid well, but yes, I mean, she's still here. I see them there outside. But yeah, I said, Under no circumstances can I be disrupted. If she's crying, drive off to the playground, whatever. But no, it's fine. It turned
Ice
out
cream.
okay.
Ice cream
Ice
always
cream
works for
always
me.
works.
Jana,
Thank
I
you.
so want to honor and acknowledge you for your integrity, your brilliance, certainly your radiance, the adventure that you are, the courage that you bring into the space. And like what I really love about you, and what I know about you, is someone listening to the story could just hear, it could almost be disheartening in like all of the stuff you've done, and how it's just like, yeah, then I felt the moment and then I chose into the moment. And what I really adore and honor about you is that I know none of those choices has been like an easy, oh, I just saw the moment, and I maybe one or two along the way, but that like I've sat with you and borne witness to like your process, and like you being in it, and then you unfolding, and like allowing the next thing and stepping into it. And I just find you so reliable in your work. And it's just it's a breath of fresh air in a coaching profession, where we need more people that are just so automatically a yes to taking on their work. So thanks for all of the work you're doing. Thanks for sharing all of this with like our audience. I just think this is a super valuable conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate you and for the opportunity to be here.
I love you. Have an
Love you too.
awesome weekend. I'm going to stop the live, and then you and I will say goodbye. But I got to say that now because I was just ending the live, and it's weird because you get kicked out. It felt,
Goodbye, everyone.
yeah, it felt very Adam of 15 years ago, where I'd be like, okay, bye, click, hang up that phone immediately. Okay, everyone, oh, I didn't ask a very important question. So if people
Oh,
do want to find their way to you, Jana, and like
mm.
learn about your work or participate in something you're doing, where's the best place for them to do that?
I would say currently I'm mostly active on LinkedIn and Instagram at Coach Jana Hendrickson, and LinkedIn is just my name. So probably there's a good start, and I have a website with my name.com as well. So
Jana Hendrickson, myname.com, or janahendrickson.com, janahendrickson.com.
JanaHendrickson.com. Yes.
Aha, awesome. Cool. Okay, everyone have an amazing weekend. I'm going traveling somewhere. We had to shut down our travel plans because there's forest fires Canada's on
Oh
fire.
yeah.
So
Hmm.
we've rescheduled them. The person that this is superfluous, I'm going to say at the end anyhow. The person I booked our Airbnb through, I wrote and I was like, hey, the provincial ministry is saying don't travel in this direction. There's forest fires everywhere. We're a little worried about getting stuck. And he's like, it's no big deal. You can just take a bunch of logging roads that aren't paved. They're totally fine. It'll just take you an extra 3 hours to get here. I'm like,
Mm,
fuck that. I'm
no, thank you.
canceling this. And now I'm writing Airbnb to ask them to help me out with this. So anyhow,
Oh,
I hope everyone has an amazing weekend. Love you all. Thank you. See you soon.
bye.
Bye bye.